the Starfleet Academy, and the Starfleet Runway. Today, episode 302 of Trekland Tuesdays Live with me, Dr. Trek, Larry Nemecek, coming at you here from the heart of Trekland through Portal 47 for some sanity, clarity, and the big picture in all things Star Trek. Lots going on this week. Some events here in LA this weekend. It's Yuri's night coming up at the end of the week. I'll talk about more of that. But when and of course, things are bubbling up. Picard is popular as ever, which is why in the middle of all this, and perhaps even getting ahead of what's become one of the big avenues, one of the big platforms that Paramount has for its own, it doesn't depend on a Comic-Con or another con. It has First Contact Day and Star Trek Day in the fall. And who knows, maybe even Pioneer Day. Pioneer, Frontier, to make news announcements. But no, they've jumped ahead of First Contact Day, which is April 5th, to be dribbling these headlines the last few weeks. Led off, finally, kind of climaxed by the announcement of the Starfleet Academy show. Kind of came out of nowhere as I was getting on the plane to travel last Thursday, which was a big deal. Now, on one hand, oh, there it is. On the other hand, it's such an unguarded secret. It's one of the biggest known secrets ever the last few years that's one of the subsequent series waiting in the wings it's been announced ever since Alex Kurtzman did his big deal a year into Discovery, his big deal to be basically the showrunner now for the current empire of current Trek. And that was one of the follow-on series mentioned. The other one, of course, was a Section 31. After a year of people being in love with, well, how could you not, of Captain Georgiou, Michelle Yeoh. And that's been a tortured path to it. In case it was actually bumped off the launching pad when everything about Ensign Mount and Pike and what became Strange New Worlds blew up. And I want to talk about that too, because it's as much as we talk about Starfleet Academy, there really is a Starfleet Runway as well. And it's already been a thing to behold. But yeah, Starfleet Academy, let's just remember for one thing, though. A lot of speculation based on this press release, actually the formal press release that the trades picked up on, Variety and Hollywood Reporter and Deadline and all of that. This interesting line in here, though, for the first time in over a century, our campus will be reopened to admit individuals, yada, yada, yada. Which immediately tipped me off and many, many more to say, oh, they're going to set this Academy show in the 32nd century. That whole bit about 100 years, unless they're totally pioneering some new turf somewhere in between, that seems like a natural because that's the story of the burn and the reopening. And what do you get with that? Well, do you get the continuation of Tilly? Do you get the continuation of any of those cadets that look like they were carefully cast and made much of, and even got into a little bit of their backstories in the 2 or 3 spotlight scenes we got of them near the end of Discovery, the last third of the season or so? That would make sense on a business and an amortizing sense because you've got all the 32nd century sets and props and costumes and familiarity with background, that would be its setting. Okay, will it specifically be about Tilly? Will she be a launching character? Think about how these things are creative, and they're not just iconic, and they're only 10 episodes. So it's overlaying the modern era of Trek with what's happening outside of Trek today, and also what our history of Trek series is. But yeah, that looks like a thinly veiled attempt to say that it'll be carrying on the 32nd century, which actually, for all the Sturm and Drang, for all the grief we've gone through to get to there and to create as much backstory there as we've had, it did seem like a crime to just completely back away from that era now that you've invested so much in it. And I know a lot of folks, it's not your cup of tea. Maybe that's been the storytelling choice. Maybe that's been the people in charge of running that particular series. Maybe that's a lot of things. Maybe it just took time to grow on you, just like it took time to grow on the writers and the creative team. Whatever that is, it's worth another shot, just as a lot of people are figuring out that the 3rd season of Picard was worth another shot. These things are not set in stone. They're not monolithic. And the streaming nature, we were just talking about this weekend, the streaming nature of, as disappointing it is to only get 10 shows, it's very flexible and malleable. And sometimes that's a good thing. You can have an instant restart without a lot of baggage and overhead and time investment. At the same time, you can be malleable and things can change. Hopefully, it's always on an upward curve. And if anything, we've seen that, yeah, with Picard, and not to knock the first two seasons, but it's obvious that people are just in love with Picard. Now, if Starfleet Academy isn't that century, if it's going to carry on, it's the next one up. We've had these two series in mind here for so long, the Academy show, and talking about, there's been subsequent press releases. Let me just say, it's not just about the kids, although it feels that way. And you know what? If this is a CW angsty show, then so be it, because that's become a known genre. You've got all the DC, Marvel, especially the DC shows on WB. If this becomes an entry there, although it will be Paramount Plus, it will not be on the CW. Did I say the WB? Okay, I'm really going backwards. It will be that, but the press releases all talked about it, how it will also include their professors in and out of Starfleet. You've got civilians, you've got people in uniform. The young crew, okay, they're a little soap opera, maybe hopefully a little bit of that, but not too much. But also, for better or for worse, a deep, dark threat unknown to the Federation, much less the Academy. So I'm hoping they don't feel the need for the big bad, and we hang our hat on that. I'm hoping that the ever evolution of handling Star Trek in a serialized world, in a serialized universe, continues apace, and that does not become an albatross around the necks. So that's exciting. I don't mind seeing. I'd like to see ongoing check-ins with what's going on. We still haven't heard from Klingons, Romulans, Cardassians, whoever else has come along the pike in the last 800 to 900 years. There's still a lot of catching up to do, in the manner of catching up with the Romulans, and I guess we did. Romulans and Vulcans and Navarre, and seeing how that galactic millennial thread played out, and even the Trill update too, and the Earth update, and what's happening with the reunification of the Federation. They kind of give it lip service at the end of the season. We'll see. Obviously, we've got another season of Discovery to go before we get there. And it's feeling like, obviously, the last season of Discovery is going to end at 5 before we get there. Could the decision about ending 6 not been purely financial, but the need to maybe lay down some story points that can still launch the Academy show, and maybe focus in the ending where it's not just a wrap up of Discovery, but it's also a more finely tuned setup for Academy show, even before they thought they'd be doing that. Maybe so. Maybe that's part of the recipe here for what the added on scenes to finish off after 5 seasons will be with Discovery. What we do know is that's not going to happen now, not this fall, early winter. It's going to be all in 2024, ballyhooed up the wazoo, and that's fine. We've got that mid-June arrival date for the new Strange New Worlds, with Lower Decks kind of in its traditional slot, and then the next 10 of Prodigy after that. I'm assuming the next 10 with a gap. So that's our big picture going on. But as far as the Academy goes, that's one of the 2 shows on the runway. And can we just say, before we go further, most of you know that the Academy idea is not a new one. In fact, it's been all kinds of things, and it's had all kinds of fan reaction. What a lot of folks are not up on, and we need to get to this on the Trek Files, is that the original idea for a Star Trek animated back in the early 70s, back on Saturday morning TV, with all that was an Academy show, which, if you think about it, that's how a lot of the post-run primetime series, familiarity. The thinking on Saturday morning TV is that, hey, if we've got a built-in audience, or at least a starter audience, we're so much further ahead. You had the legacy type tone coming out of Hanna-Barbera, coming out of Warner Brothers, even. Whether they're just replaying old theatrical cartoons, thank you, Bugs Bunny, Daffy Duck, Roadrunner Hour, what they can do. And then the adventure and the superhero creeping in. And then you had the whole big blow-up TV media history lesson, psychology here, after the assassinations and the horrendous violence of 1968 and the cleanup Saturday morning, let's find some solutions. all the superheroes went away. All violence, even the cartoon violence, almost went away. And that's when you had the rise of it's the kids solving mysteries. That's when you had the rise of sometimes the kids have a band too. I mean, that's when you had the Scooby-Doo generation. No violence at all. The most violent anything happens is, cartoon violence. You're hit with a ton of goo, or you do a cartoon slide, whatever. And in the middle of that, part of what fit that formula was, let's take the Brady kids. Let's take the Harlem Globetrotters. Let's resurrect Laurel and Hardy. Let's do the Pink Panther. Although it was old school, iconic character, But in that mix, yeah, a cadet show from Star Trek would work just fine. It's NBC. Boom. We know there's some residual, especially within a year or so, there's residual love around it. And Star Trek was a kid's show. So, of course, it made sense. And it made sense to the powers that be to just dumb it down and have cadet kids, right? And whether or not it was going to depend, it was going to even feel like it was a link to Star Trek. That did not necessarily have to happen. There could be all kinds of wackadoodle boners if they just let anybody be in charge. But because Gene waded in, got the contract, Dorothy Fontana was the showrunner, it not only wasn't about kids and cadets, they decided, no, this is going to be a continuation of our adult adventures. We're not going to embarrass the brand, and we're sure not going to dumb it down and kidify it. And that's what happened. But that was the initial idea, until, much like the initial idea of Next Generation, Gene waded back in and said, oh, no, I'm going to be hands-on with this, and here's what we're going to do. And, of course, NBC is like, fine, Gene, baby, just put it on TV. And going with Filmation. So that was actually the first blushing attempt. It's not rocket science to think about an Academy show, especially when the market is young people. So then flash forward to not that being the motivation, but the motivation being an aging cast. And after Star Trek V and after Shatner being indulged to direct, and the studios got that out of their way, and they've developed the favored nations clause between Leonard and Bill. After that, and the fact that Five stumbled a little bit, and there was just a little bit of murmuring that maybe we shouldn't subject our hero actors to a full length, the excruciating schedule. Are they too old to do it? So the original blush was Harve Bennett wanted to do his famous Starfleet Academy movie. Introduced by an envelope story. Would it be Dr. McCoy telling stories to a bunch of wide-eyed, eager cadets? And if you saw the scenes in Picard this season of the wild-eyed cadets coming up to beg stories off the retired Admiral Picard, a Picard who is specifically at the time was supposed to be in humiliating exile at his wine ranch. Well, apparently he's eating in Los Angeles, so he's not that withdrawn. But that feeling, that vibe, that was going to be the opening scenario for the Academy movie. And we would get the origin stories, the backstories, played by, most importantly, a young Kirk actor, a young Spock actor, hell, even a young DeFore. Aside from the fact that they're at different ages slightly, but oh well. Young Scotties, that was going to be shoehorning. And then even younger Uhura's, she's a high school, I don't know. She and Sulu are high school kids interning at the Academy. They're on advanced placement programs. But the powers that be, and God bless them, and especially the way the next 2 years played out with Paramount, the studio being going through 2 administrative changes, the idea survived finally, but it wasn't Harve Bennett's idea. They decided the original cast needed one more send-off, and a better one. The Star Trek V left a bittersweet taste in a lot of people's mouth. It sure did for the accountants. One more. What would it be? Let's call in Nick Meyer again, get involved. And the idea survived through that overhead. And and we wind up with our signatures at the end and the feel-good moment. And a lot of Star Trek universe world building happens in Star Trek VI. But back at the launch pad, Harve Bennett feels like he's put so much into the franchise. He's been snubbed, and he thinks his only recourse is to take his marbles and go home. Much the same way Gene had felt when he was fighting over the time slot, and once Star Trek Original Series 3rd season was stuck back at the killer hour, the murder hour, late night Friday, date night, when none of his audience is going to be watching, or a big chunk of them won't be. he felt like he'd drawn the line in the sand and had to take his marbles and go home too. So, Harv did that, and his script is now out there, finally, after all these years. Would it have been a worthwhile addition if you put yourself back in the mind of the Star Trek franchise in our one cast? No, we had Next Generation by then. That's an interesting discussion at some point. But again, not new. In fact, it was so not new that then a sea change later, when we've had the pendulum swing 3 times, and it's 2006, 2007, and Star Trek has imploded, Viacom has imploded, but here comes J.J. Abrams on his shiny white horse to resurrect Star Trek. And it winds up being a Prime Universe edition, which was it winds up being a Kelvin alternate universe edition, which at the time I hated. Since then, it's thank God. But the format of the show in any timeline was going to be those young officers, to the point where once the storyline was out, Harv Bennett, who's now in retirement, Harv Bennett is out there, wants to take them to court, wants to take them to arbitration. Hey, you stole my idea. And they actually arbitrated, and I don't want to say basically ignored Harv by then, which was sad, but basically said, no, it's a new, they won the case, whether it was arbitrated or in the court of public opinion. So again, you have an Academy show in Star Trek 09. Now, it doesn't feel that way, and yeah, it can be fake universe. It can be not Prime. So we don't have to pay a total attention to it, aside from the experience that it was in the midst of a Star Trek graveyard. But again, this Starfleet Academy idea is not new, to the point that the idea was often floated at the time at pivot points in the Berman era. What's the next show going to be? DS9. Oh, Voyager. What about Voyager? What about the spinoff on from Voyager? Now, before UPN started to collapse and the world went with Enterprise, right? The sequel show. There was a lot of talk about doing an Academy show then. But in the 90s, late 90s and early aughts, fandom was pretty much united against doing that. You know why? The line was, no, everyone would say, please, no, Starfleet 90210, as a knock on Beverly Hills 90210, which was a huge show for the WB, huge show, but it was all teenage angst, and mainstream Star Trek fans who were so serious did not want to see a bunch of teenagers running around, with teenage acne and sex problems, and have that be the bottom line paradigm for their Starfleet drama and universe building and timeline adding to. So that was ballyhooed. I'd love to sit and talk and explore how far along that concept even got. But suffice to say, we didn't go there. We didn't go to Black Ops. We didn't go to medical psyops. We went with the founding of the Federation, Romulan War, except we got cut off before we got to the Romulan War and the founding of the Federation. The whole point of that era was to get to that, and we didn't. And I will forever be bummed until we get back to it again. But again, this Starfleet Academy idea has been out there. Now, what's interesting now is that out of the gate, at the time Alex had his renewal, 2018, and set up the situation, the structure, the framework, once we went through the baby steps, and once, oh my God, Discovery's birthing pains through 3 sets of parents, it feels like. Once that was quasi-settled and the smoke had started to clear a little bit, and I'm talking on the end that matters. I'm talking about the money and the structural end, and the fan debate would go on for a long time, obviously, at least until our dear Captain Pike entered the screen and started to drive a narrative there about the future. But until then, the initial announcement here was just a deal, right? And at the same time, people started to openly talk about things in the pipeline, other ideas, other series pitches that were out there. Not in the official CBS All Access release at the time, but you had the trade papers, you had Variety, Hollywood Reporter, Deadline, openly speculating the murmurs and the whispers that it confided, the unsourced chatter. And there were always two more plus another one not mentioned. Section 31, which by that time people were in love with Michelle Yeoh, pre-Oscar, and the Academy show. And yes, there were some who were groaning again Oh, please, not Starfleet 90210. Same thing of the 90s, 20 years resurrected, but an awful lot of the world seemed to not embrace it. But it was down as a rumor. It was an unsourced, here's what we hear, down, 5 paragraphs down after the initial announcement. And a lot of Stephanie Savage, who had done several shows, WB, was often linked as the producing partner origin source. And that was fine. I still wondered what tone they would take, especially early on with the Kurtzman era, just the machine being in place. And that was one of those ideas that got kicked down the road. Now, what was higher profile? Section 31 was always higher profile. We know that there was actually a month and a half of development on Section 31 before the Anson Mount Pike tsunami became apparent. It probably linked a lot in with Michelle Yeoh's schedule, who would have been part of a Section 31 show. So for all those reasons and the reasons we have yet to hear about, but we can kind of roughly guess, Strange New Worlds takes its place next on the Starfleet runway, and it's the next to take off. And as everything goes along, and now we've had the recent drama about the streaming industry retrenching, all of that, and is Discovery with its geriatrically old 5 seasons. Oh my God, you went 5 seasons on streaming, and a 6th was in the works until it was cut back to 5 and repurposed at the end. As we sit and watch that and think, is that the fall off from this industry-wide, the end of the free money? Throw the money at it and we'll see what sticks. These 2 shows are still on the touchpad, and Alex and others at Secret Hideout have mentioned them themselves. This is not rumors in the shadows. They get it's still alive. It's still alive. What I was curious about was the fact that Section 31, I assume, would be the first out of the gate. And whether Michelle is now part of it full time, which I doubt, or whether she helps launch the 2-hour pilot movie, or whatever you call the way Discovery launched, whatever happens there, whatever the makeup is, whatever century and setting it winds up being set in, I just assumed it would be next. But no, it's going to be the Academy. So it's not a new one. I think of all the times, and listen to me here, I think of all the times an Academy idea has been out there and floating, this might be the best time for it to be the best received, and best of all, the best conceived and crafted. I think all those other times throughout Trek history, an Academy show might well have been problematic, given to the sway of the times. And of course, Harv's script was a 2-hour movie. Whether goofy Paramount might have thought that was ripe for a spinoff at that point, who knows? We've had Aaron Spelling producing it. But I think if you're going to do an Academy show, I think this is the most mature time in the franchise to see. I think if the timing is right, the people in charge. And what's interesting is, of course, if you were following along at home, the producing partner for this, Noga Landau, new to Star Trek, executive producer of Nancy Drew and Tom Swift. I didn't even know there was a Tom Swift series on the CW. So youth-oriented, okay. We'll see what happens. Hopefully responsible, hopefully within the parameters of all that. Hopefully they handle it. But it's a new tone and a new voice. Not someone from the Star Trek family, but a new tone, new voice going with that. And if you do still have trepidations about an Academy show, let's stop and think here. We went to Prodigy to get the young kids. We went to Adult Swim, to Lower Decks for the Adult Swim audience, right? For the snarkier side. So anybody, teens and 20-somethings. So Gen Z, I know we all enjoy. See, the thing is, Prodigy and Lower Decks, though, are not just for that target audience, the target demographic. They're made, I think, so well, and I think the proof's in the pudding. And I think Prodigy especially woke a lot of people up to that idea even faster than, or it took longer than Lower Decks, but they got there. That, the target audience doesn't have to be the lone audience, and it can be expanding by its borders. And I would love to see the Academy show appeal to anybody older than 25. That would be nice. And I think that's probably what's in the field. That's the bar. That's the goal. That's the mission. We'll see how they do. It's been in development for a while now. All of these shows, I think Discovery being cut back from 6 to 5 years was a surprise to everybody involved, obviously. Other than that, and Section 31 has gone through a couple of eras of generation being put back on the burner. People had to move on with their lives, and we'll find out more about that as we move along. But this comes down to, we've been watching that part of the runway, if I may create a phrase. But what we have not been watching is the runway of now the last 2 months. Right. And so we've got there may be whole sections of fandom now that think hashtag Star Trek Legacy is a series that's been in development for ages. And it's almost a tightrope. It's like, be careful what you wish for, Lieutenant. You may get it. Picard season 3 has been so astonishing, and it's been such a revelation. Now, these series, Star Trek in these series, they're all just people. They're all just people. Next Generation season 1 and season 2, if you want to go to a classic example. Original series season 2 had Gene Kuhn inserted into the mix. Late season 1, early season 2. Season 3 did not, although there was carryover. Season 1 and 2 of Next Gen did not have someone who fit the mold and fit in greatly like Michael Piller. It was the Chaos on the Bridge carousel of folks, some of whom might have had a different shot had it been at a different time, a different mix of people, but mixes of people and timing is everything. And then you love it when you get it, you're in agony, or you're just frustrated when you're not. And we've seen that, how history will judge the run of the Picard show itself. But certainly right now, people are as excited, and there's a mini movement. And of course, they want to crown Terry. Hashtag Terry Trek is a thing, and it should be. Part of me, the cynical side of me, will say, well, yeah, this is what happens when you hire people that know what they're doing. There's an ethical point through all of this, and it's on the art side and it's on the writing side. What are the two core premises of Star Trek to make it popular? You got to have a good core show. You got to have the writing and the character format and mix, and you've got to present it. As we have seen, you've got to still have it linked to the Star Trek universe. The more, the merrier. The point is, do you only hire people for those positions that are old Star Trek fans, whether or not they worked on a previous Star Trek or not? Does that lead to inbreeding, however well intended? Do you still need the fresh blood, the fresh, attitude? People famously say Nick Meyer came to Star Trek having not seen one single frame of Star Trek until he sat down. So you never know on some cases, but here's a happy case where Terry's just set the light on fire, and he has a writer's room, and he's still working, obviously, with Kiva and with and Alex on Up the Ladder and the whole Secret Hangout team. But this season was his baby, and going through even the folks who were already in line creatively in the decisions being made. There's a huge groundswell, for Star Trek Legacy, hashtag. Will it be the next series? And there's probably fans who are just enraptured with Picard who may not tune into the fact that there were already, yes, 2 Star Treks on the runway. They were on the tarmac waiting to take off, taking their turn, one of them even being bumped once before for various reasons. Does the mob who is so enraptured with Picard and demanding hashtag Terry Trek and demanding Star Trek Legacy, are they going to sit tight while maybe the best thing since sliced bread happens as these other 2 series run? Or is the tone of things going to be such that they have to bide their time for a year, 2 years, 3 years, if ever? Is there going to be blowback? Are we going to have, friendly rivalries? The last thing I want to see is for there to be any kind of, I don't know, this sounds so petty to say, but it's NBC looking at Gene saying, come on, Gene, you're underfunding this mail-in campaign, right? This Save Star Trek campaign. You're behind that, really? And he's saying, no. Now, of course, we know now that he was. But at the time, the thing was, he was just lighting the match. The Tinder out there was all too happy to take up the banner. Now, that's not what's happening here. It's a fun thing. You're smart and savvy. You're in a world where there are many series coming along. Maybe not even 10-episode seasons here. Maybe you've got mini movies. Maybe you've got 3-parters. They're talking openly about that as a response to the very ratcheting down of streaming. Alex Kurtzman himself talked about we need to get back into other formats of storytelling, not just the 10 episode a year season that now is the norm. And I'm looking back at you, Nick Meyer, for your 3-part SETI Alpha 5 show, Between the Kirks. Maybe it can come back. Maybe it can come off podcast status after all. No. It's a wild, wild world. It's just that the irony of Picard being so popular this year with so much potential, and yes, with a legacy cast right there of new characters, old characters, who would want to put it on, who would want to be a regular and who would want to be a guest. And now we're talking about a regular is someone just doing 10 episodes. Now they're shot. They're not 7-8 days. They may be 10, 11, 12. It may be 3 weeks for a 2-episode block, the way Picard shot it. So you may have a little bit longer, but it's still 10, not 26. What's going to be the future there? I'm just wondering about all the fans who are in the campaigns now, the Star Trek Legacy campaign, about sitting to wait, because these other two, never say never, but these other two, Academy has been announced now, which is further than Section 31 ever got. Section 31 was on the launch pad with a payroll for 6 weeks, but was never formally announced as coming. There was never a release date or even a release window to be announced. So Academy is further along than Section 31 was. Methinks by the time the corporate machinery announces a show, they don't want to take it back. That's the whole point. So it will be next. We're at least going to be waiting for one. Discovery won't be off the airwaves until next year. There won't be a hole opened up until then. Picard, of course, will be off. They'll be filling Picard's slot. So all this thing about timing and do they still keep 5 shows on a year? It's just we've maybe got lesser budgets. We've gotten smarter about the overhead since the early pioneering Discovery days. And there's a phrase I never thought I'd say, but there it is. The early pioneering Discovery days of 2017 and 2016. Just wondering what's going to happen with that, because that's certainly the buzz right now. Star Trek Legacy, people are just waiting, hoping, dreading, and Terry talking openly about, I have nothing to say. I am not in talks. I do not work for anyone in Star Trek or Paramount. Getting to be very obvious and very open. No one who worked on the last season of Picard, unless they're working multi-shows already, but nobody has a deal. There's no secret plan that just hasn't been announced. It's just going to have to wait. And of course, as all good things happen, Terry's best advice just recently with at the live panel, at the Mark and Darren's panel by remote, talking about what can fans do? Just keep up the peaceful protest, keep up the hashtagging, keep up the campaigns. We're not the letter writing era anymore. We're not paper and stamps, but all the ways. There's a petition at change.org, I think, to have it be. That's what you do. That's basically what brought us Strange New Worlds. It was a different world then. The infrastructure was not all set out in stone with 5. I mean, this seems amazing, but just a short 3, 4, 5 years ago, things were still blue sky and nothing settled in stone. And how does CBS All Access fill out their schedule of Trek so that the Trek folks don't turn it off if they don't particularly care for anything else? Well, we're past that now, and it's a little more problematic. There's a little bit more weight and gravitas to shift around now. And people have been in line for a while. And that's not going to be disrupted unless something completely bizarre happens that we don't foresee right now. It won't be another case of the tsunami of popular demand comes in and one or two other things click right to make that happen. Probably not going to happen this time. So, yes, Star Trek Legacy, if that is indeed your name, may have to wait 2 years, 3 years, just because we have to channel that in the right way. And hopefully we can do that. How do you channel this? I created a monster. How do we channel that for all the best ways and not let that need to a competitive negativity, a competitiveness about who's going to be the next Star Trek show? I hope that doesn't emerge. I don't know, because I still saw people in my feeds still leaning on this great Picard show that I've seen fandom united as not in the last 5, 6, 7 years over. People, as much as they love Lower Decks, a lot of people just didn't like the humor slant, and I get that. That's fine. A lot of people were their doubts and fears were overcome. And Prodigy, I still just feel like a lot of people don't take it seriously to watch it. I think that's changing more and more and more. I'm doing my part to get them there, and as is Cadet Alice. But I think the animated shows just have a built-in fall off in viewers. So there's a lot going on here. Who's paying attention and all that? I don't know. What do you think? If you are watching this later, I wish you could join us live sometime. We're here at 1 Pacific, 4 Eastern, 9 UK GMT time, and 10 Central Europe. It'd be great to have you live if you can, but I would be remiss if I did not thank, an ever-shifting lineup of our TTLers, our Patreons. The TTL Club this month is Diana Hopkins and Robin Wilson, Lawrence Todd, Anne-Marie Siegel, Justin Porteous, Galinda Bruton, Chris Jiggins, Pranakasha Productions, Ryan and Andrew Jazemski, and our live wires, Robin McLean, Byron Bailey, J.R. Poole, Hubbard Gunn Johnson, Alan Hoensi, Dave Gregory, Tobias Rex, Donna S. Runyon, welcome Donna, and Casey Shafsky. That's it. What am I saying? Our Patreon is very simple. There's a $5 and a $10 level. You can go more if you want to, but that's all we're asking. It's patreon.com/Trekland Live. Maybe you go, you see something else you like too. They do that at the end of the month, so we just started a fresh month. But I'd love to have you aboard. We're gradually, slowly expanding the streaming end here at Trekland and making it possible to do a little bit more there. So we'd love to get the numbers up, although I am keeping it simple. But the more you help, the more help we can have here. So thanks, everybody, for doing that. I would be remiss if I did not mention that the storied 10th season of the Trek Files, our podcast for Roddenberry, is continuing. This week we have back Gary Goddard, who was at the head of Landmark Entertainment, and we talk again about the saga that led to the late great Star Trek: The Experience. And we especially talk about, if you experienced it, speaking of the active word there, or if you've only heard about it, we talk about the development and, would you believe, accidental nature of the storied transporter on the original Experience ride, which became the Klingon encounter. Check it out. The docs are there. We've got some more production art and some charts and a chart of the floor plan of the Experience. All there, the ground floor anyway, at our site on Facebook. You can catch it anywhere, the audio, where all fine podcasts are caught. But our docs of the week and our home base is there at Facebook, the Trek Files. So check that out too. I do want to say, if you're in the LA area, come out to Yuri's Night next Saturday night at the California Science Center. It's become a big deal. My friend Amy Ingram is helping bolster the turnout. There are going to be more Trek people there than ever before. I'm going to be there. Janet's supposed to be with me. And just more, Yuri's Night honors the anniversary of the night of the first person in space, Yuri Gagarin. Yes, he was a cosmonaut. And yes, we love our Alan Shepard and Grissom and John Glenn. In a global sense, they're honoring the first night of a man in space, a person in space, human in space. And with a lot of science educational, there's some science fiction aspects, but science fiction is the inspiration. I'm looking at you, 1701, in the Smithsonian restored. The inspiration for all the real world aviation and space and our future looking. And there'll be all kinds of special guests and exhibits and things. So if you're in SoCal, Yuri's Night's actually global, and you should check out events near you. I know there's something in Houston and there's something in New York, East Coast. But venues large and small are having a Yuri's Night events. You might want to check it out near you too. Might even be on the other side of the anniversary and a week later, I believe some are. But here in LA, it's under the Endeavor shuttle before it's removed to build a whole new pavilion for it in a couple of years. It's exciting. It's fun. A lot of fun. A little something different and yet just the same. So if you are around, I'd love to see you there for that too. That's going to be it for us, gang. If you are leaving us right now, if you're watching on YouTube and later, hey, just, stay healthy, Do all the things, okay? Stay woke. Check your sources. Keep your ears open. And trek well, everybody.